Unexpected surprises can be both good and bad. And in the last 24 hours, we've had both. So I mentioned in yesterday's video that a new fire had started to the west of Reno in an area near what's known as Verdi. And I didn't expect much to come from that. When I initially saw it, it was only 30 acres, and I thought they might be able to get this one under control quickly. Well, unfortunately, the fire quite literally exploded, and by this morning, I believe we're in the tens of thousands of acres burned, and it's stretching from just north of Interstate 80 toward the California border there, up north toward where our oldest daughter lives. And we just got through a week or so ago a couple of fires, the Bug Fire and the Stallion Fire, that were the North Valleys, which is where one of our kids live, and over toward Palomino Valley in Spanish Springs, where my dad and my other kids live. And we were concerned, but in the last couple of fires, my dad did have to evacuate for a series of days, and he's currently doing paperwork for FEMA to get reimbursed for things because they lost all of the food in their refrigerator and freezer due to power outages. They cut the power to try to prevent the fire from becoming any worse than it already was. So with this new fire, which they have named the Hawk Fire, it did explode and headed to the northeast, excuse me. It went over what is known as Peavine Mountain, and we were watching the fire cameras up there last night and could see the flames encroaching on the cameras. One of the cameras did then cut out. The second camera that's up on the peak is still active, but there are a lot of people up in that North Valleys area, which is Lemon Valley, Golden Valley, Panther Valley, Stead, going up to the California border. And there was no containment as of the last time we checked. And unfortunately, the fire is headed toward this very populated area that has few points of evacuation. There is Highway 395, which goes from Reno up to the California border. And most of that is now closed because of the fire, because the fire has burned up toward the freeway. And obviously that area, there was a lot of open space recreational area around Peavine, but now it's getting into an area where there are a lot of businesses along the Highway 395, but it's also on the other side of 395. They evacuated people. And last night, our oldest daughter had to evacuate. She was in a get ready to evacuate zone, but the evacuation zone was literally right next door to her complex. So last night, our other kids went and retrieved her and took them to her house, along with her 3 cats. So we had a very tense night watching that all unfold, because when I initially saw it, my hope was that they would get the fire out before it spread beyond the 30 or so acres that it started out at. And it expanded quite a bit very quickly because there were strong winds. It's been very dry, low humidity, and it's a very mountainous area. So they have had tankers dropping fire retardant. They call in helicopters that can drop buckets of water, and there are a couple of lakes in the area. There's White Lake and Swan Lake out there where they can pick up the water and drop it on the fire. But they have literally had to evacuate tens of thousands of people from the North Valleys. And with only 2 ways in and out, like I mentioned, Highway 395, then there is a secondary road that goes over into what's known as Sun Valley to the east, and that has access points into Reno and out to Spanish Springs, Sparks, and the Palomino Valley area. So that was how my other kids got in, was through that back way, and then they evacuated south on Highway 395. So it was a very, very tense night, and both JT and I did not sleep very well for obvious reasons. We know our daughter is safe now, but it got to the point, and I have not confirmed this, but from what I'm hearing, I know for a fact they did end up closing one of the evacuation centers because it was at capacity. So they had to open a secondary one at the Reno Sparks Convention Center, which was much further south of where the original evacuation area was. And then it sounds like many of the hotels may have booked up, potentially, partially, due to the fact that one of the places in the evacuation zone is an area called Boomtown, and it is a large hotel casino complex. There is a sporting goods store nearby. There is an RV campground there, and there are also a lot of housing areas in that part of the Interstate 80 corridor going westbound. So the evacuations there, I don't know how many people would have been staying at Boomtown at that time, but I assume a lot of them would have gone into Reno and taken Reno up on the evacuation. They lower the rates, the nightly rates for the rooms, and they waive resort fees and things like that during these kind of situations. So it sounds like a lot of the hotels may have also booked up last night. So obviously, there are hotels outside of Reno specifically. People can come down to Carson City, which is another half an hour, but I'm sure there must be rooms down here as well. So a lot of people were affected by this fire, and it sounds like potentially this one may have been started by someone off-roading on a dirt bike. As I mentioned yesterday, I think it doesn't take much, like sparks from an exhaust, and everything could just go up in flames. So that was the unpleasant surprise that we had yesterday. And like I said, neither JT nor I slept well. I'm sure none of my kids slept well because they've got quite the menagerie in their house right now. Gosh, I don't know. I can't even count how many animals they would have in that house right now, plus four adults and a couple of kids, and just their house is packed. Thankfully, it's a pretty good sized house. So I think with a tiny bit of shifting around, people could have some comfortable, quiet space, but it's going to be a little cramped for maybe a few days. We don't know when these evacuation zones are going to be lifted. One of the evacuation zones is the school that my oldest daughter teaches at. So it doesn't seem like she's going to have school, at least for the next few days. So she may be visiting with siblings for a few days unexpectedly. And we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to go up and check in on them today and see if they need anything. There's really not much I can do at this point, but who knows? Maybe having mom around will help. But the other thing that happened yesterday, which was the more pleasant, unexpected surprise, was that JT and I entered the Best of Carson competition that is done by our local newspaper, the Nevada Appeal. And we did not think that we had won anything because my assumption, and I may have been mistaken in this, but my assumption was they would have notified everybody who had won in their category. And they, on Friday, had an award ceremony, which I thought, the winners would have been invited to. But apparently, while everything was unfolding last night, JT remembered this competition and went to check on it because they announced the winners in the newspaper yesterday. And it turns out we won our category, which we're flabbergasted. So Two More Books LLC won the most unique business for 2026. And we were up against some interesting people, including a lot of storefronts that we assume would have employees and a lot of regular customers. So we're not entirely sure how we could have won this, but maybe we've gotten the word out a little bit. JT and I also entered the Best of Carson that was done by Carson Now, which is kind of a news aggregate online. It's not a physical newspaper. And JT came in third because we entered separately as authors. He came in third, and I didn't even place. But to have our little company win that category while, or finding out that our little company had won that category while all of this other stuff was happening, it does put things into perspective. We are excited to have won in this category, in this competition, and it gives us bragging rights. And as we discussed in our podcast this morning, many businesses who win will get themselves a banner, and they proudly proclaim they are one of the best of Carson City, and there is a special insert that's published in the newspaper, so they get that as well. And hopefully it will at least work to do what we were hoping for, in that it will become more visible to our local community, and maybe people will be curious enough to check out our books. And it would be really nice to have a little extra income so that we can help out more during situations like what happened to our daughter last night, because obviously we could not really go to get her because of the fact that we could not get north from our home to hers due to the highway being shut down. It's good that our other kids were able to get in there to get her out, but it would also be nice to have a little extra income to be able to help out once she had to evacuate. If she needs anything, it's probably going to be a similar situation to what's going on with my dad, where her power was cut due to everything that was happening. So everything that is in her refrigerator is also going to spoil, and she may end up also having to do paperwork. And I don't know if she's not officially in an evacuation zone, whether or not they will cover that. I know my dad, he was getting reimbursed for his food. He was also getting reimbursed for the hotel nights, but she won't have that since she's actually staying with family. So I don't know how much she could claim. I don't know how these FEMA claims work out, but I do believe our governor had to, again, designate this as a disaster zone. And unfortunately, the Hawk Fire, actually the evacuation zone, is up meeting with parts of the area where the Bug Fire burned just a week or so ago. And it's just, there are too many fires going on out here, folks. I know fire is natural, but there are situations where I think certain things are making, the extended drought, for example, is not helping matters. So take that for whatever you will, but there are factors at play that I think are making things a little bit worse. And when they happen in such populated areas, it becomes a major disaster very quickly. So I know I probably talked a lot about this yesterday, even though I didn't go into as much detail because I didn't know how many people were going to end up being affected by this one. And I think in many ways, numbers wise, with the evacuations, this one is actually more intense than what happened in the last couple of fires. And they don't have, I think the Bug Fire is close to full containment. The Stallion Fire was also close to full containment. There's one just over the California border called the Elephant Fire, which was fully contained. And all of that has happened very recently. So please be careful out there, folks. Whether you're out doing recreational activities, be aware of your surroundings. Be careful about any kind of spark. I mean, like I said, if this was somebody riding a dirt bike on what is probably a recreational path, it's not something that you would think could cause problems, but it became a problem very quickly. So really think about the activities that you're going to go out and do in the summer months when things are hot and dry, in especially areas like ours. And because if this was one person on a dirt bike, just think about how many people this has ended up affecting. And it is a tragic situation. But that really put into perspective the whole Best of Carson City thing, because if the whole fire situation hadn't happened, we would have been a lot more focused on, oh my gosh, we won this. This is so exciting. Not sure why we weren't notified in advance. Maybe they weren't notifying everybody, and it was just up to us to keep track of what was going on. Who knows? But we really start remembering what's important when we get these unexpected surprises at the same time, for good and bad, because obviously the bad ones, the ones that are affecting our loved ones, our friends, and so many people we don't know, but we still feel a lot of sympathy for, because, people may be losing their homes. We don't know for sure. When these fires are going, it's such a dynamic situation that you don't really hear about what structures may have been affected until after the fact. And in the Bug Fire, I know there was at least one fatality, unfortunately. A woman and her husband were not able to evacuate quickly enough because I guess the wind shifted and blew the fire back on them. So these fire situations are very, very dynamic and very, very dangerous. And like I said before, our thoughts go out to everybody who's being affected by this one in particular, but all the other ones as well, because these are not good situations to be in. And yeah, that's just how Sunday has started. We're feeling very out of sorts this morning due to a couple of unexpected things cropping up yesterday, and like I mentioned, I will be going to visit my kids today, so I wanted to at least post this, kind of get this out of my system, I guess, before I go up there and I end up being the sympathetic mom and just sit there and see what they need me to do, which probably will be nothing but, provide hugs or check on the kitty cats or something. I don't know. At this point, I'm feeling very helpless because, like I said, there was no way we could have gotten her out yesterday. So I am thankful that we did have other family in the area that were able to help her. And it sounded like there were people who were on foot trying to get out of there with their few belongings that they could carry. So, a lot of this is unconfirmed. These are just things that I've heard people post online. Some of them may be true, some of them may not. So there's always that caveat, have to take everything with a grain of salt. And we won't know for sure exactly what has happened, basically until everything is over and cleaned up. And hopefully everybody who needed to evacuate did. Hopefully they are able to get some containment on the fire today. And hopefully they will be able to prevent a lot of those houses and businesses from being destroyed. And yeah, I need to stop dwelling on that. I know this wasn't the most cheerful video, but these things happen. And like I said, it really puts life into perspective. So I am still, of course, focused on my release of Battleborn Bride, but obviously that is taking a back seat today. I won't be doing anything really work related on that front because I will be out supporting my family. And I hope that you are in a situation where your family is all happy and healthy and out of the path of danger, whether it be fire or storms or whatever. And I feel a very strong sense of deja vu. I think I've been talking about this quite a bit, but a lot of natural events and sometimes human caused events can cause some major chaos. So just keep that in mind. When you are having really good times, please enjoy them as much as possible. But remember, things can very easily swing in the other direction. So be prepared. Not to say that you need to worry. I don't need to go any further into this. Just take care of yourselves, people. Take care of your loved ones. Appreciate them. And I hope you all have a wonderful day. I'll check in with you again tomorrow, hopefully with a more cheerful subject. I'm Cassidy Carson, and this is The Life of a Writer. Take care.